Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good morning, good morning, good morning to this, the Wednesday edition of Vuka Nazo, your morning news analysis show. My name is Sihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. I must apologize for not having been on your screens yesterday. The Durban rains, the hectic Durban storm that we had dumped a lot of water, damaged a lot of my equipment, unfortunately. And saw me having to deal with puddles of water. But everything's back in order somewhat, albeit I'm short on a bit of equipment, but nonetheless, we're here. Welcome to it. Remember, if you're watching this simulcast on YouTube or on Facebook, do me a favor, hit that like button, please, and share the stream. And if you're watching on YouTube in particular, help me reach 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year by subscribing yourself to the show. Hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so that you're notified every time Vuka Nazo is on your screens. Visit us, please, on our website at bigdaddyliberty.com. There, of course, you can also financially support us. Trust me, I need them now more than ever. But nonetheless, you can financially support us with anything between 50 to 100 Rand. On average, we do about 75 Rand per person per month. With that being said, enough of the jibber jabber. Let's get straight into the news. The South African killing fields continue unabated in a very tragic incident, a sad story. AKA or Keenan Forbes, a famous South African rapper, gunned down in a brazen hit on a popular street with eateries and nightclubs here in Durban, Florida Road on Friday evening. Of course, him being gunned down as he was celebrating his birthday allegedly and set to perform later that particular evening. He's also murdered with his friend and former manager, A1 Tebelo Tibbs Motswane, who was 34 at the time of that particular incident. An incident that really shocked the country given the brazen nature of it, and a reminder of just how violent and indeed how South African criminals, whether they are hitmen paid to do what they're doing as is alleged in this incident, or these crazy mass murdering criminals that we're now beginning to see who act brazenly with impunity. These individuals who kill people and have no regard for the life, the liberty and the property rights of ordinary South Africans. And they act as they do simply because law enforcement has completely collapsed in this country. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. It has completely collapsed from a lack of leadership rather at a political level because of a useless police minister, Ubheki, and of course a equally as at times corrupt and inefficient and poor management structure of the South African police services. And why is it poor, corrupt and badly inefficient? Well, mostly because of how a lot of these individuals are not fit for purpose to manage what should be a 21st century efficient modern police service that is visible and that is able to lock away criminals. And because of that, people are dying. Keenan Forbes, of course, aka being the latest, more prominent victim, I should probably say. But I shouldn't say the latest because the numbers are beginning to tally up. Every hour in South Africa, 3 of our fellow South Africans are murdered in this country. On average now, 75 South Africans are murdered daily. The numbers are beginning to become harrowing. And as I mentioned earlier on, there has been a 50% increase in the number of mass murders in this country. That's where more than 3 people are killed in any single incident. Let me get into some of this and quickly read, of course, of that AKA incident. And by the way, it's not the only hit that happened. I'll take you to Eldorado Park in a moment, but a refresher, of course, on what happened in Durban on Friday. And please, a quick disclaimer, I'm not going to play any video clips of that CCTV footage that's circulating of the hit, out of respect, of course, for the Forbes family and indeed just out of decency. But nonetheless, this independent online piece wrote the story up and detailed it as following. Now, police are working around the clock, they say, to find the gunman who killed rapper Keenan Forbes, 35, better known as AKA, and his friend Utebelo Tibbs Motswane, who was 34, on Florida Road, Durban, on Friday night, as pressure mounts from all sectors of society. Again, the images that came out of them were absolutely brutal insofar as that hit was clearly, and I say the word hit because it looked like a hit, with the killer stalking AKA, waiting patiently for them to come out of a particular eatery on Florida Road and then proceeding to shoot him point blank from behind him, killing him seemingly instantly in that scene. Very shocking images indeed. And it must be said that you know, condolences to the Forbes family and indeed to the Motswane family at this tough time. Indeed, Durban artists did come out to show their support and indeed to commiserate with the family, holding a impromptu gathering, an almost celebration, if you will, of AKA's life just outside the scene of his murder. This was some of the scenes and what they said at that event.
They must know that we condemn the killings and they are not alone.
Everywhere it seems like even kuma restaurants we are not safe anywhere.
This
is a huge loss to the creative industry, and Yabona, whether we're from KZN or from Joburg, from Cape Town, it's a huge loss.
Man, I think just the state of crime in the country is horrible. I mean, government needs to do something about our safety in the country. I mean, it's not about a celebrity or what, it's about a normal person walking in the streets. How safe are we? And that's have a lot of influence on how we're going to get tourists coming to the country to spend their money. Is South Africa one of the safest places to visit and enjoy your holiday or not? You know, so if we're going to have such killings, that doesn't paint a good picture for us. So we just hope government really do something about it, whether there is going to be a minister of crime or what, but we need something done about our safety in this country.
And they're absolutely correct. The violence, the murder, indeed the wanton disrespect and disregard for human life, property and liberty in this country by the criminal class, the criminal elite, if you will, has gotten out of hand. That's why even the appearance by politicians at that particular ceremony to honor the life of aka rang is a bit hollow for me. Why are the politicians there when they themselves are the ones failing South Africans? They themselves are the ones seeing, because of their inaction, the deaths of, those 75 people per day in this country who are murdered. And again, this hit that we saw, this alleged hit, I should say, that we saw on AKA is not the only one. I take you now to El Dorado Park, where on Sunday, prominent anti-gang activist in that part of the world, Ayob Mungeli. This is a chap who, of course, was at the helm of an organization known as PAGAD, which has been outlawed, but nonetheless, PAGAD in El Dorado Park, prominent in the area for taking on gangsters and drug lords. He too was gunned down in almost similar circumstances, where the perpetrator alleged to have stalked him and shot him point blank from behind. Let me read this News 24 piece which detailed how this happened, and indeed it cites a one Brigadier Mkhatsani Maluleke, who's the station commander of the El Dorado Park police station, has saying the following: that Mugeli was walking through a park between the flats in the area and the car wash on a Sunday at 7 p.m. when he was shot in the head from behind. He said the perpetrator had followed him on foot and that Mungeli collapsed near the gate of the car wash. Police in the area said they had heard a single gunshot and arrived to find Mungeli dead. Now, the article itself goes on to describe Mungeli, who may have had a bit of a checkered past himself with his association with PAGAD. Now, PAGAD itself having issues. You'll remember, of course, them being designated a terrorist organization in the early 90s. But nonetheless, this is a man who'd served prison time, came back and redeemed himself with the community seeing him as an indispensable part in fighting back again against gangsterism in the area. That same article describes this and says the following about him. Now, Mungeli, a former national intelligence agent, was arrested in Cape Town in 1999 for carrying explosives for PAGAD and was handed an 8-year sentence. Residents, though, of El Dorado Park were shocked by the news of Mungeli's murder, and even hardened criminals revered him. He was known to be fearless in his fight against crime and would often escort police into violent areas. End of quote. Now again, I describe this incident because it's two hits on two relatively prominent individuals that has shocked the country. But the violence continues unabated because the SAPS in this country, under the leadership of a hapless and useless Begicele, are simply allowing, if you will, criminals in this country to act with impunity. I take you now in the same breath to Marion Hill, just on the outskirts of Durban, where a shocking incident of 5 people being gunned down occurred. And indeed, let me read from this Highway Mail story which detailed this particular incident. Now, police are on a manhunt for at least 3 men who are said to have gunned down and shot and killed 5 people and injured another in 2 separate crime scenes which took place in Marion Hill on Monday afternoon. That's on February the 13th. Police spokesperson Colonel Robert Nechwinda said police received information that the suspect stormed into a vehicle workshop and shot the owner and 2 other people. The same suspect reportedly proceeded to another vehicle workshop just 2 streets away and shot and killed the owner and 2 other people who were working at the workshop. 3 of the deceased are in their 50s and the other 2 are reported to be in their 30s, said the police spokesperson, end of quote. Now, I raised this issue, dear South African, because I want you to see in patently clear terms that you now live in a South Africa that has descended into a complete hellhole of crime. You now live in a South Africa that is defined by criminals who are hitmen and indeed mass murderers. That is the South Africa you're now raising your children in. That is the South Africa you're trying to live an ordinary life as a faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African in. And if you're going to continue believing that useless police ministers and useless politicians in this country are somehow going to save you, or somehow going to get the SAPS, that is the South African Police Service, back to a requisite level where you can deal with these criminals, then you're sorely mistaken. You, dear South African, are on your own. I've said this once and I'll say it again. Get training, get licensed, and get a firearm, and then band together with like-minded South Africans, defense-minded South Africans who have a defense mindset, and look after your families, yourselves, and your communities. You are on your own. Okay, I take you to KZN now, where you'll know this because I've told you this before. ANC politicians in this part of the world are under a lot of pressure, and they are deeply unpopular. Now, very tense scenes played out when a group of about 100 protesters gathered outside the residence of the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Ewan Nomusa Dube. These residents, of course, belonging to a particular organization or grouping called Umsinsi Oguzmilela, if I pronounced that absolutely correctly. Gathering, as I said, outside the residence of the Premier to voice their concerns about the dire state of the province and the collapsed level of service delivery. This incident, which I'll show you images of in a moment, has ANC politicians very, very scared. Watch this.
Injalo lento sikhona la eCloof umphakathi lo wase South Africa osothe awuthathe ithuba ukwenze u-door to door lo ohlezi wenziwa yibona laba ama-politicians so umphakathi uchoose wona ukuthi wenze u-door to door uvisithe kule mizi le emkhulukazi yama-ministers.
Yes, that's right. These individuals, under the pretext, of course, of calling it a door-to-door campaign, which is a bit cheeky, proceeded to go to the residence. I'm not sure if it's the private or the official residence of the KZN Premier, Nomusa Dube, who's, of course, from the ANC, and took their grievances to her gate, and a very tense standoff happened outside the particular incident. Now, of course, in response to this, the Premier's office and indeed the ANC and a litany of the ANC's friends have condemned this incident. Indeed, here's a quick piece in The Independent, which cites how they're calling for an investigation into this incident. Now, of course, the MEC for Transport and Community Safety and Liaison in the area, 1C Port Shlomoga, not only calling for an investigation, basically detailed how he saw this group as having issued threats against the Premier. It reads as follows. Now, he says the group hurled insults and made intimidating gestures, an incident which had caused trauma and fear to the family members, especially children. That's according to Shlomoga, who said the illegal gathering by over 100 people at night outside the Premier's residence smacks of dubious intentions and posed a threat to the family. He goes on to say that while the Premier is thick-skinned and able to handle all matters that come with being a public representative, storming, as he describes it, her private residence and intimidating children crosses the line. End of quote. Now, I'm not sure if these people stormed the private residence. That's slightly dramatic. But I think there is something to be said perhaps about the inappropriateness of this particular incident. But at the same time, think of this particular incident from the perspective of the people who were there to protest. The inappropriateness of ANC politicians failing them. That is the catch-22 of this incident, of how politicians are not going to be safe, thinking they've insulated themselves from the failures of their own governance. People are clearly challenging politicians quite overtly and quite directly now. Now, again, I'm not taking a side in this. I'm not saying one group was right or the other, whatever the case may be. I'm merely pointing out that it's becoming very difficult for ANC politicians in KZN to avoid the very people they're failing, especially as I've always argued that the writing is clearly and patently on the wall that in 2024, the ANC are likely, strongly likely, going to lose this province. All right, that's it from me from this episode of Vuka Nazo, the Wednesday edition. Do you like how we begin your news day? Well, you'll love our friends over at the Daily Friend. That's dailyfriend.co.za. They come to you live Mondays to Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Make sure you check them out. Now, with that being said, reminder to you on your way out, please hit that like button and share the stream. Please do me those two solid favors. And if you're watching on YouTube in particular, subscribe to the channel. Visit us also on our website at bigdaddyliberty.com. Now, with that being said, I will see you tomorrow for the Thursday edition of this show. Remember, we come to you weekdays from 7 a.m. So tomorrow morning, bright and early, for another episode of Vuka Nazo.